So I took him into the shower room and he shook my hand. He said, "Everything okay?" And I said, "Well, if you're going to hit me like that every night," I said, "I'm going to have to either give you some receipts or you're going to have to start loosening up because you're not going to have an opponent to work with because I'm not going to make it."
History shows that you and Sheik had such a great run, and then you turned, as we used to say in the magazines, you became a rule breaker again, and you hooked up with Freddie Blassie and the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov. And my goodness, I remember the letters we used to get at the wrestling magazines of people who wanted to kill you.
Oh yeah. Well, I first went to G.I. Joe. Right. Shortly after the Sheik and I had kind of run our course, G.I. Joe, Hasbro Toys contacted me right before WrestleMania. And of course, Vince and I went round and around because I said, "Can't we do both? Can I be G.I. Joe and can we do wrestling?" He said, "I would love it. I would love it. But I just signed a contract with LJN and that would be a conflict of interest." So we had to go round and finally I didn't know what to do because I wanted to stay at the WWE and I wanted to go to Hasbro and be the first living G.I. Joe. So I was sitting at the table one night with my family and my wife said, "What is wrong with you? You haven't been acting right." And I said, "Well, I've got this problem." "What's your problem?" I said, "Well, Vince McMahon wants me to stay and wrestle and continue to help build up WrestleMania #1, and Hasbro wants me to come there." And she said, "Well, that's a pretty easy solution." And I said, "It is?" And she said, "Yeah." She said, "Bob, you can always be a wrestler. You can't always be the first living G.I. Joe." I said, "That's why you get the big bucks, honey." And so I called Vince the next day and off I went. And a lot of bad things happened, between me leaving and going to G.I. Joe that I got so turned off with the WWE that I didn't even watch it.
I know that was the period of time. That was the period of time you came up to our office a few times and was telling us back at the magazines what was going on.
Right. And so I didn't watch it. So I'm finished up with Hasbro. Pretty much, I only had like 3 or 4 months left on my contract. And I'm at a hotel in Cleveland, Ohio, and WrestleMania VI is advertised to buy the pay-per-view in the room. So I called up the front desk, "How do I get the pay-per-view?" I said, "It's time for me to maybe watch it again." So I hook it up and I watch it. And Bill, I was just amazed at the production that I was watching. Look, when I left the WWE to go to G.I. Joe, they probably had 3 or 4 cameras. That's all they had, 3, 4, 5 cameras. They must have had 25 cameras on this pay-per-view. It looked like 1 million people were at the Toronto, dome there. And I just could not believe it. I watched the match with the Ultimate Puke and the Immortal Slime, Hulk Hogan. And so I got a piece of paper out of the desk of the hotel in the room there, and I got a pen, and I put, "Dear Vince," and I said, "I just watched WrestleMania VI, and I have to salute you and take my hat off to you because it's one of the best productions I've ever seen in any television. Hollywood should take some lessons from you." And I signed it Sergeant Slaughter. And then I put P.S. the match with Hogan and Warrior, and I put 2 big letters, P.U. because it was a stinker-rooney. And so shortly after that, about 2 weeks after that, I'm sitting at home watching a NASCAR race on a Sunday, kind of drifting off in between the race. And my phone rings. I'm the only one home. I answer the phone. "Hello, Sarge?" "Yes." Vince. Well, there's only Vince. Of course, there's only one star.
Right.
He said, I got your note. I really appreciate your feedback on the production. Kevin Dunn and I have worked endlessly hard to make our production the best that there is. And I said, well, you've done that. I said, no. And I went through the whole thing. I hadn't watched your show in 6 years and blah, blah, blah. So he said, I see your contract with Hasbro is over with shortly. And I said, well, funny you should know that. And he goes, I need to know those things. That's why I know it. And he said, are you ready to go back to work? And I said, yeah, I'm ready to go back to work. So I tell my wife at dinner that night and my 2 daughters, guess where I'm going tomorrow? Where are you going? I'm going to Vince McMahon's house because we all lived in Connecticut. And they said, oh, good, good. I bet he's going to make you the real American hero like only he can do, my wife said. And I said, yeah, I think that's what he's going to do. So I get to Vince's house. Wasn't like we even missed a step. As soon as I get to his house, he's out there giving me hugs and he hands me a water, and we walk in, we talk a little while, and he takes me into his little kind of a library, and he's got the prototype of the Coliseum in LA. Mm-hmm. And he's got big screens all over this Coliseum, and he said, this is WrestleMania VII. It's going to hold 104,000 people, and I want to break the Detroit record. He said, and I want you and Hulk Hogan to do it. And I said, oh, really? I said, well, how are you going to turn Hulk Hogan into the villain? He goes, Hulk? No. I want to turn you into the villain. And I said, oh, how are we going to do that? And he said, I said, I actually came here thinking that I was going to be the real American hero. And he goes, no. Here's my idea. And he started laying out this Iraqi Sympathizer. You're back from the wars and wherever you've been, and you're disappointed in the military of the United States military because they're weak. They're letting things get by in their country and around the world, and they're allowing Saddam Hussein to take over Kuwait, and he just laid this whole thing out, and I said, yeah, that sounds pretty interesting. He said, you want to do it? I said, well, yeah, maybe I'll do it. He said, well, it could be a little bit tough. So why don't you go home and talk to your wife and family about it before you give it?
Dangerous, yeah.
Right. So then I said, okay. But I knew I wanted to do it because I've always loved being that villain, and this sounded like a pretty rough villain, And little did I know, when I got home, my wife was expecting, of course, the real American hero story. And I told her the complete reverse. And she said, an Iraqi sympathizer? You're going to get killed. You can't do that. You just came off of G.I. Joe. You're the real American hero. I said, well, that's what Vince wants. She said, well, Bob, you've always controlled your character and made this decision. So if that's what you want to do, you go ahead, but don't tell me that I didn't tell you so. And I said, okay. So I called Vince up. I said, we're all ready to go. He said, okay, let's do it. We're going to do it nice and slow. You're going to do some vignettes where they don't really know what's wrong with you, but you're not being the friendly guy that you were when you left. And so we were doing this really nice and smooth and slow. And I get a call from Vince. Another Sunday, a call, but it was a little later, about 1 o'clock in the morning. And he goes, Sarge? Yes, Vince. Oh, hey, Vince. A little change of plans. What's the change? He said, well, the Ultimate Warrior broke Macho Man's wrist last night, so I'm going to have to put you in his spot. And I'll put you with the Sensational Sherry, and you just take care of all the matches that they have left, and we'll go from there. And I said, oh, okay, no problem. But I never, had met the Warrior, and, I didn't know anything about him. And the first night I wrestled him, I mean, it was like going to war. And he was as stiff as you were, And so I finally had to, after the match, he closed me one time, and all I saw were stars. And I was going to try to get up for a couple more, but I couldn't get up. And so I went into we finished the match, and I went into the locker room, and I got a towel, wiped myself off, and before I showered, I walked over to his dressing room, and I walked in, and he saw me, and he goes, "Hey, okay, Sarge." I said, "Would you come? Let's follow me over here." So I took him into the shower room, and he shook my hand. He said, "Everything okay?" And I said, "Well, if you're going to hit me like that every night," I said, "I'm going to have to either give you some receipts, or you're going to have to start loosening up, because you're not going to have an opponent to work with, because I'm not going to make it." And he said, "Oh, it was a little stiff." I said, "Yeah, quite a bit of stiff, yeah." So he's, "Oh, I'm sorry." So it didn't change. And so I just had to fight him back. So most of our matches were, all out brawls. We never
like
talked about the match, never talked about it. Back then, Bill, we didn't have scripts. We ad-libbed everything pretty much in the business. And so we just were out in there on our own. So, but finally we got through it all. And one night they decided that Sherry had been with me long enough, and Macho Man was thinking about coming back soon because he's healing, and so we should get a new manager for myself. So a couple calls were made to Minnesota, and Adnan El-Casey was brought in, and they told him because he was an Iraqi, he lived in Iraq and went to college with Saddam Hussein and knew the language, this would be a pretty good manager for me. So I right away started thinking, well, I'll call him the general. So I called him up a few times, and I said, if you can find a general's outfit or whatever and bring that in and wear that would be great. So the first night in Hershey, Pennsylvania, he comes in, and we talked in Vince's office, and Vince said, well, go get your outfit on and come on back. So he leaves, and here he comes walking in the door. I thought it was Saddam Hussein. He had the beret on and the uniform and the medals, and looked just like Saddam Hussein, except that he had a gun and holster on. It was plastic, of course. And I said, and Vince says, "Oh my God, what do you think, Sarge?" I said, "I love everything, but get rid of that plastic gun. Don't give anybody any ideas. That's a real gun. So if you want to get rid of that, I'm in." So I brought him out there the first night in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And we could barely get out of the ring because he was screaming on the microphone in their language and making the people even madder because they couldn't understand, and they knew he was from Iraq. And so we just went on terror. And Vince just said, "You control whatever you want to do. If you go too far, I'll bring it back. I'll pull the reins back. But just you know what you're doing out there. You just go do it." So that's basically how I became the Iraqi Sympathizer. And shortly after that, Khosrow needed a place.
Yeah, it was amazing. No, it's amazing because, like I said, in the magazine offices, we got hundreds of letters of people that just wanted to get a hold of you, and
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So now let's move forward now to after all this happened. When was the last time you spoke to Khosrow or saw him?
Well, we shortly after I won the title from the Ultimate Warrior, another crazy things, in the business. We're having this match, and I hear this huge noise, and I look down, and here's the Warrior laying on the second rope, and I see Macho Man running off with Sherry, and he had knocked him over the head with a scepter, and I guess he was giving him a receipt for what he did to his wrist, because Randy was very sensitive of that kind of thing. You don't hurt somebody in the ring, and you take care of your opponent, and it was just festered in him. And when he hit him with that scepter, Bill, he hit him like a baseball bat and knocked him out. Actually knocked him out, because I was going to pull him. I was trying to pull him off the rope, but he was dead weight. So I finally got him off him, and he laid in the ring. And I said, well, I'm not going to let Macho Man get all the heat. So I dropped an elbow on him, and I figured he's going to kick out. So 1, 2, and he didn't kick out. 3, and I'm the new world champion. So I get this purple belt. I'm holding this purple belt up in the air, and he finally kind of gets to his senses, rolls out of the ring, and runs to the dressing room. And the next thing I know, I'm the world champion, and we got to do all these promos because now I'm the champion.
Yes,
and in Miami, Florida.